jumping on with me. Um, like I said, May's coming up. It's Stroke Awareness Month, so throughout the month, I'm going to be just releasing different videos, interviews. I've done a lot of work over the last 2 years. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it's been a lot of hours, especially when you have brain damage now, and
Sure.
writing, and it's almost like I'm dyslexic now. So it's very frustrating,
Yeah,
but you work through it. You know what I mean?
right. Yeah, I could see where that would be difficult. And it's, for me, it's, I've been doing this for 20 years now. It's something like, I said in the message, I want to do this for the next, 40 years of my life. So it's something that if we can figure out a preventative way to make it a little bit easier,
Yeah.
then great. So,
And and I appreciate that, because I mean it really starts from the obviously the top down, you know what I mean? And
hmm
in any academy, but then also jiu-jitsu as well as a whole. You've been around for a while. I mean, I know I started jiu-jitsu in oh oh 08, and then got my blue belt in 10 from Comprido. So
sure.
I had been hurt. I was hearing guys talking about you when I had first started.
Oh, well,
Um,
that's crazy. I don't know why anybody in the world would ever talk about me, but yeah.
I think
No,
you're a half guard guy, yeah.
yeah, I like playing. Honestly, like close guard and half guard stuff. What's funny is like all the stuff that I like to do never seems to work out for me in competition.
Yeah,
Never used to work out for me in competition. Close guard used to work out really well for me in competition, but it's odd that it kind of seems to work that way. Sometimes I consider myself I like playing gi. I don't like no gi as much. I
yeah,
still like no gi, but just not as much. But for some reason, I compete better in no gi than gi. I don't know
yeah,
why, but
yeah, yeah.
um,
That's cool. Yeah,
but
so
yeah,
I've known of you for a while, and like I said, thank you for reaching out so you can get a better understanding. You can reach out to your tribe, because I think the first thing is just bringing the general awareness to the general jiu-jitsu community that
yeah, for sure.
this can happen, and I think that seems to be the biggest barrier that I've seen so far. So my associate Josh, he's a black belt. He's a Cali black belt. His stroke was 2018, so like right after mine in 2017. And since then, we've been working together just to pool all the data that we have.
hmm
People reach out to us saying, "Hey, we had similar stories," and so over the last few years, the data has accumulated. In our spreadsheets, it's over 100 cases that we have documented. Those cases that we have documented have either come from somebody who Facebook messages me and just said, "Hey, so I just came across your story. This happened to me, and this is my story," or I may have posted a article or just bring up a general topic in like a Facebook group, and then all of a sudden everybody starts kind of chiming in. You start to hear stories, and I'm able to take those stories and do like a data mine, and then just throw it on the spreadsheet with their name, information, their Reddit ID, wherever I get the information. And so right now we're working on just taking the data and compiling it, and then putting it into a medical journal so that doctors can have this data and look at it, because step one is from the BJJ community, it's awareness, but then also from the medical community, it's awareness. When these practitioners come into the ER because they're suffering some type of trauma-related head, um, blurry vision, vertigo, dehydration, whatever the symptoms may be, they're very similar to concussions. Um, it sounds to me, and I'm not an expert by any means on concussions, but from uh, what I'm seeing is that a lot of the doctors are misdiagnosing um, a lot of these practitioners, and who are later on then having strokes. And typically, what it's happening is that they're what we're seeing, the majority of the strokes are coming from a dissection of either a carotid artery or a vertebral artery on your back.
Right.
And it really does make sense when you look at the grand scheme of things. You're a gi guy. I love playing gi too. Those collar chokes, those bow and arrows, anything pulling and cross-facing and traction on the carotids or the vertebral arteries. From a jiu-jitsu community, it's kind of been one of those things where there was really no data, so it's never really been thought about. But when you step back and think about it, is that something that we should be concerned about? So
and me from like my side of things, when I thought about it, I always thought about it in the realm of like, okay, is the brain getting enough oxygen? Is the brain getting enough blood to get up there? And so, every doctor I spoke to before was like, okay, as long as that blood supply is getting
right.
back to there within a certain amount of time, you're fine. Because I would get choked on. I've probably been choked unconscious, 4 or 5 times, at least in my life. One, thanks to Eric Schaefer, thanks to Jerk.
That's more.
Right? I had my mom contact me like 6 months after the YouTube video got released. I got choked unconscious, and that was like the early days of YouTube. She thought it was live. She was freaking out. So, but yeah, so like the coaches I think for the most part, I always thought, okay, as long as we're getting blood back to the brain, no problem. But then hearing this kind of stuff where it's okay, it's actually starting to tear down that wall a little bit,
right.
And that's a little different.
So when it does, let's just say maybe it is tearing down the wall, maybe it's not, but let's just say that maybe it is. What people need to understand is what's going to heal that artery is time and a clot. The clot is going to heal that damaged artery, and if I'm a gambling man from my data, I would tell you that this is happening. These little tears are probably happening more than we know or that we think, because people really aren't talking about it. And a lot of these people are not having strokes because the arteries do heal, and it seems like they heal pretty quickly from the people that I've spoken to they found their dissections before their stroke and then monitored, and all of a sudden it was like pretty much gone away in a couple of weeks. Whereas in a case like mine, where I'm a delusional, don't think anything is ever going to happen to me, completely ignore the signs, choke me unconscious as many times as you want. Nothing's my same thought process as you is pretty much heard that it was safe. I had a tear on my carotid, and the clot was probably sitting there for probably a month. But if you're training every day and it's not going to heal. And
right.
Then one day, Rob Smith, one of my partners, had me in North South, and I was trying to escape, and then next thing you know, I couldn't move, completely paralyzed, full stroke. The clot finally shot to my brain, and so first of all, that is something that if you're aware of this, if I would have been aware of this. If a jiu-jitsu coach would have said, "Here are some signs. This can happen," I probably could have prevented this stroke. And I think that like I said, the awareness just has to come in. Number one, that this can happen, and once we get that medical research out there, I think more people will be on board and kind of understand. Recently in Milwaukee, but here's the thing: it's like I was telling somebody the other day that the issue is that it's that everybody thinks it can't happen to me. This is such a small thing. People have been training for years. Why is this just coming out right now? Those are the majority of the questions that I get. And I would say that the growth when Bruce Hoyer started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in the year 2000, How many people? What state were you in? Sioux Falls.
Yeah, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. There was exactly 3 people training in a basement somewhere. So
Then
at least we had a legitimate coach, so I was happy with that.
what year did you get your black belt?
Gosh, 2016, 2015, yeah, 2015.
Okay.
So I was on the remedial course on that, just because honestly, I got my black belt under Comprido, and so it was
Different.
just not being able to get time with him directly, other than traveling the 8 hours to Chicago.
Yeah, right. What? How many people from that year, 2000 to 2015? There was 3 people in 2000. In 2000 when you started. How many would you guesstimate are training in 2015 when you get your black belt?
In South Dakota, we probably have, I would say, probably 1,000. I would think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and like I said, I think we're still a tiny community. So
that's kind of the that's one example of over a 15-year span. You go from 3 to 1,000 people training and choking. So
right.
the probability of this happening is going to go up higher because there's more people training. So the next question is if this exists, that the damage and we're getting more cases now, probably because more people are training. The next question would be, I'm having a stroke. But the next question would be, I mean, the well, let me just stop right there and just say, what questions do you have? Just right out of the gates right now.
Sure. Like the biggest one for me is, you talked a little bit about some of the signs. What would you say? A lot of those look like the concussion, similar to concussion symptoms. Is that
well? So
is that what you're finding?
You can tell me. So the vertebral artery symptoms are different than the carotids. It seems like the vertebral is more where people feel like they have vertigo, but they're laying on the ground. Maybe they're on the ground or like sitting down, looking up, and they have vertigo. Like the room is spinning, violently throwing up, and then like balance, like falling over to one side or another. That seems to be more of the vertebral. For mine, other than the fact that I had like a soreness on my one part of my throat, I did have some blurry vision in my right eye prior to the accident, and I did have some illness, feeling of illness. So not like a hungover flu or a sick flu or anything like that, but just more of like I tell people like really bad allergies that like it's so bad like you feel sick and you just don't want to get out of bed. That was kind of the symptoms that I had that week prior. So again, the blurry vision, the numbness of the arms, tingling, that seems to be a lot of the cases from the carotid dissections. It was funny. Have you been watching the Bulls documentary?
Yeah, for sure.
So the other night I was watching the last one with Scottie Pippen, and he was sitting out because he was having his migraine.
Right.
And I said I didn't know that growing up, and I looked at my girlfriend Linda, and I said, I go, shit, Linda. I go, I think he was having a stroke. And she said, yeah, that would make sense because they said at the beginning of the documentary that his dad, had a stroke. And I'm like, oh shit. So that might have not been a stroke, but something like a dissection. So something like that. I mean, he could have been playing and had a dissection, and it might not have been mine ended up being a ischemic stroke where you're pretty much on the ground, paralyzed, can't speak, can't move. Like it's pretty much worst case scenario. But leading up to that, a lot of these carotid artery dissections or dissections of the vertebral. Again, this isn't just from jiu-jitsu people. This is sports people, rugby. There's a study I read on a golfer who was swaying and he tore his carotid. I've seen yoga people tear their carotid. So I'm in these support groups on Facebook, and these survivors. I mean, a lot of them are just females who are jogging, working out, or really don't know. So I mean, dissection is rare to start with, but here's before I had I drew my blank when we were talking before. Even though it's rare, the question is after we look at all this input, is our dissections potentially more prevalent in our sport than others?
Right.
And
I mean, it would make sense.
And so that's when we really step back, it does make sense. And the data that I've gathered so far says that that's true. The jiu-jitsu community is not going to want to hear this. They don't want to hear it. I have a very close friend of mine who we all grew up. We all started here in Milwaukee, and eventually, you know how it goes. You start training together, and next thing you know, you kind of all have your own schools that you're training at. And he's a good friend of mine, and he just opened up his school, and he knew about my story very well. And somebody this year, he just opened up his school like 4 months ago, and sure enough, I just got 2 months ago a text message from one of his students, and training heavy guillotines, went home, symptoms, and next thing you know, went into the doctor and found out that he was having a mini stroke, and I haven't done his interview yet. But I'm pretty sure it was from oh no, it was a vertebral artery dissection. Now that I think back, it was 100%. So that's just I'm not faulting anybody in this situation, and I don't think anybody is. I think the sport as a whole, we really do have to come to terms with the fact that this is happening. And with the amount of people that we have practicing now more than in 2000, there's a greater emphasis that we need to as coaches. It's just that awareness. And what I'm trying to say to coaches is, hey, listen, it's happening. These are the signs. The stories I've heard. Like I said, it's like the guys who are training in this particular case, when he sent the text message to one of his training partners, he said, "Hey man, tonight was crazy. I basically been falling over, throwing up in the bathroom, and my balance is all over the place. Like I just got, it was just crazy practice." And it was kind of like, yeah, man, great training. You know what I mean? Was
right.
Kind of the response, where it should have been,
get your ass to the hospital.
Get your ass to the hospital. And
right.
So his could have been a lot worse. He actually works in the medical field, and when he got to the he went to work the next day, and they sent him upstairs, and they got one of the doctors. He wasn't even going to go. He was just complaining to his coworkers, like, I got this symptom. And then next thing you know, I guess they called upstairs to the imaging people, and like one of the doctors was like, get him in here right away. And that doctor said, it sounds like you have a dissection, because this gentleman did tell them that he was participating in chokes and strangles the night before. So they identified it and they were able to treat it right away. And, there's been no complications since. So that's an example of where we all have to get on board. And anything, it sounds like I'm guessing you can tell me what your protocols are. Um, but it sounds like any type of vision, speech issue. So like if a guy just got done training and he's like can't remember your name or you can't remember your training partner's names, and it's just kind of like, whoa, how do I just not remember? That doesn't make sense. That's happening a lot. So if you can get your students to understand, like, listen, if you're not, you're not there to scare them, but you have to have this conversation with them. And I do it with the people that I train with. And, any newbie who comes on the mat for the first time, I will tell them my story, after I, moved around with them a little bit, say, hey, this is what happens. And, just be aware of it. So I was reviewing some data, and my associate Josh identified that a lot of these strokes are coming from the ones who are put it. There's some guys where it's like they knew that choke is what caused the dissection and the stroke. They knew it was like that one choke, and a lot of those are coming from higher belts. And Josh says, is it possible that us higher belts just know how to put on these chokes so much cleaner? And the answer to that is probably yes. And we also know, these new guys don't know how long to take it and whatnot. Somebody gets a cross collar on me for like they got my back, and it's like I tell people, like, once they get that overhand collar grip, I pretty much know I'm dead. Now, in the past, I probably would have fought and tried to get it over my head. But now, if it's a deep collar grip, I will try to escape. But once I feel that tension, I'm tapping out because I have a stint in my neck now. So I don't want that to snap, and I don't want to die. It's not worth it. And so, I mean, that's my mentality of training. It's like I have to learn how to tap when stuff gets too deep, or if I get in a situation where I got too far into it. From a training partner's perspective, us higher belts have to be responsible for the fact that we can do more damage than everybody thinks, like, oh, it's that spazzy white belt, but I don't think those spazzy white belts it's not as clean as the blacks and the browns and the purples. So, we have to be aware, like when I get somebody, especially a new person, maybe it's time that maybe we don't kill them with that choke. Maybe we move on to more arm bars. And that's what I've gotten really good at back defense, and I've gotten really good at back offense. For me personally, that's helped me protect my neck when you know the offense and you know the defense really well. So that's been my focus. And then, again, it's like from your standpoint, from a coach standpoint, you just can't be that dummy all the time that lets your students get deep chokes on you until you make sure you're gargling. There's got to be some respect for your health as well. And I don't know what that is. I don't let anybody choke me anymore. But I'm in a different situation. But
Sure.
Can chokes be practiced where it's with that in a practice? Do we have to go full pull every single time? I don't know if that's necessarily so. I think, I know right now it's like these are just open conversations that we just have to have as a jiu-jitsu community, and that's what I've been doing with these coaches and guys like you, um, you know, open to ideas so that we can share them with other schools and just bring. Step one is getting the awareness out there, and then step two is just having some procedures and protocols in each gym that we know that we've done our job to educate everybody who's on the mats so that it, something like this happens to them or one of their training partners, they're able um, to handle the situation to prevent the stroke. I mean, strokes can be prevented, and that's stroke is like the worst thing that's like a life and death situation. So that's it's it's not like a broken arm or a broken leg. Like once the brain's fried, you're pretty much done. You're a vegetable. You're dead. It's so from if you have ischemic strokes. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. I don't know if you have any ideas off at the top of your head or what your protocols are, or if there's if that answers your question, if that's similar to what the concussion protocols.
Sure. No, the real reason is with we've been doing MMA for 20 years now as well, and I've seen a huge change in that too. Because 2000 to honestly 2010 or 2011, it's in MMA. It was honestly okay. Let's punch each other as hard as
Right.
we can. Whoever stays at the end of it, you're the tough guy, so you win. Each practice round, and you saw like a big change in that when they started adding in some of the neuroscience and you know concussion protocols and things like that into the world of MMA, and you saw that change drastically. Except for, like I said, you'll still see that out there a little bit with some smaller gyms, but a bigger gym for the most part, you're going to see a lot more awareness of that stuff. And so I think that's probably going to be the same route as this. And so I think honestly, a lot of us were, as far as coaches, were naive to that back then, and I think we're probably naive to this stuff now. And so it's just like you said, a matter of awareness. And so, with our local area here, we've been fortunate enough to, we have a ton of MMA events. We've had a UFC in town. For a town of 200,000 people, we've had a UFC, a Bellator, and a ton of LFAs. And so the doctors around here and the research teams really got behind a lot of it, because they get access to guys like, Robbie Lawler and Anderson Silva and everything. And so, with that, anytime we mention anything regarding combat sports, they get really excited because it's a new pool of research that they can do with a lot of athletes. And I think, you know, for the last couple of years in our gym, when we have anybody coming up for fights, they'll come in and they'll do a bunch of neurological tests, and they'll say, okay, let's see how fast you can run this. Okay. Remember these numbers. Okay, do this other neurological test, and then they'll do that about usually 4 weeks before the fight, and then usually the day after the fight, and I think a week after the fight. And so now they're going to be adding in MRIs and a couple other things as well. But it from a coaching aspect, I love it because it kind of allows me to sleep a little bit or at night saying, okay, I understand that inherently all these things, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, MMA, all these are dangerous. But if I can mitigate that as much as possible and make sure that, when I go home to sleep at night, that I know that, okay, my athletes aren't quite as in danger as possible, or as they would have without that information. I guess it still might happen, but if I can somehow prevent it, then I want to do that. So that's kind of where I'm at.
How do you think that MMA? You're exactly right. Like things have changed as to how the safety of trainers and the fighters. Do you think that has to do with just the UFC being so big with the sanctions and all the people? Yeah.
I think that became. I think that became a really big deal. The neurological side of it, with movies like Concussion coming out and the NFL stuff. I think the UFC, like you said, getting bigger, more more stuff coming with the boxing side of things as well. I think it just all became more prevalent around that same time, and I think the NFL side maybe bumped it up a little bit. But like you said, I think the sport is also just getting bigger. So
yeah, right.
Any of the doctors that I talked to had, no idea, or as far as both the doctors and the research team, really had no idea about any of this information. When they came to me and they said, okay, we want to study all the effects of MMA, I said, well, there's this jiu-jitsu stuff and things as well. And like initially they're like, okay, yeah, we don't have to worry about that. That's pretty much non-contact. We're good. And so now when I bring this to them, they're like, oh, okay, this is interesting. So
yeah, that's cool. Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, honestly, we do classes differently at our gym, and I want to try to figure out how we can make this, a safe environment to train. Because obviously, I still want to train, but if it has to involve certain limitations, or certain limitations for certain people, or like you said, protocols in place, then so be it. I mean, if it's it's the same thing. I think for the longest time, nobody ever wanted to talk about staph or ringworm or things like that. And so for us, at our gym, if we can make it an open environment and somebody says, hey, I think this is this, or, I'd much rather have a person, tell me about any symptoms that they're having, skin related or other, so I can make for sure that it doesn't disseminate amongst the whole group.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's cool, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will. Over the next few months, we should have, like I said, the journal information. Probably over the next few months, getting that published is a good first step. That you can say, hey, here's some cases. Josh and I are putting together just that general protocol, what to look for coaches, and something that you can pass on to your students, so that, like you said, you're not the expert on that. We don't expect you to be. We just want you to have the general awareness, and then we can pass on that information, that you can put it in your Google Doc or your Evernote, and pass it off to the students. And we're hoping that when people sign up, it can just be part of that initial enrollment and orientation, and having that good conversation. So, and maybe then I have noticed that so if this makes any sense, when it happened to me, I had all these training partners next to me, and those guys, even though they saw it, it's still like they still kind of play their own games, meaning very aggressive on necks, and kind of it's taken them a while to adapt to the fact that this did happen. But the new guys who I came in and right away I told them my story and this is how it is, those guys are very aware of the damage, and they have been very good at working with newer people. They're not so aggressive with their other training partners. So, that spazzy white belt syndrome, I think that if you can bring, and a lot of people, I mean, how many times have you heard somebody complaining about some neck because some spazzy white belt, got a grip on my head and just wouldn't let go? So, having those conversations in the beginning could mean the difference of, maybe not losing a student, because how many guys over the last 20 years probably never came back to their third or fourth class because somebody got a hold of their neck and they couldn't move it for 4 days. You know what I mean?
Right.
I can tell you, I'm guessing a bunch. So yeah. So I'll definitely be getting that out. We're gonna be get this stuff published, get it into the medical journal, so we have some actual, it's factual, get data. Like the interviews are up online with, a lot of these people, and, you can, it's all public knowledge. People have, talked about their experiences on, like I said, Reddit or Facebook groups or wherever it is. So we've accumulated it, but people are always go to Dr. Google and they're looking for it and they're like, oh, can't find anything. So it's got to be really rare. So that's been my goal, and I appreciate you taking the time to reach out, like I said, and getting guys from the top down in your position that are respected in the community is huge. So I appreciate that, Bruce.
Yeah, well, like I said, if there's anything I can do, please let me know. I'm gonna keep talking with the research team here just to see if
Yep.
because it'd be, wonderful if we could figure out some way, even as a guy that's been doing it forever to just even a baseline of like you said, protocol
Yep.
and ways to mitigate it. So
Absolutely. Awesome.
awesome. Thank
All
you very
right.
much.
Thanks for your time, Bruce. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk soon.
You as well.
All right, brother.